It is exactly 9 p.m. top of the hour, and you're just right on time for KUTV Primetime News. This, the 16th day of May, the year 2024. Indeed, it's a day that we have much and more lined up for you. But first thing first, our top stories tonight. Tonight, trade tops agenda as Ruto meets Uganda President Yoweri Museveni in Kenya. No retreat, no surrender. JSS intern teachers holds nationwide demonstration demanding employment under permanent and pensionable terms. Also tonight, don't touch the bread. Kenyans decry fall proposed finance bill of 2024, terming it punitive and painful to ordinary Kenyan. Plus, DP Gachagwa's office denies making 1.12 billion budget request, blaming the media for misrepresentation.
This is KUTV Primetime News with Auma Evans.
I'm not alone. Sammy Okelo will be assisting us on the sign language interpretation department. Remember, you can follow this broadcast on all of our social media platforms. We are live on YouTube at KUTV News Live. You can tweet us on X at KUTV_Kenya at Auma Evans. Remember to use the hashtag Primetime News. So tonight we begin Primetime News with matters diplomatic ties. In a move to deepen bilateral relations between Kenya and Uganda, President William Ruto and his Ugandan counterpart Yoweri Museveni signed a tripartite agreement allowing Uganda's state oil firm to import her petroleum product through the Kenya. Two leaders also put pen to paper memorandums of understandings that will benefit both countries. James Baraka starts us off tonight.
Following a bilateral meeting held between Kenya and Uganda at State House today, the government of Kenya, through the Ministry of Energy and Petroleum, has signed a tripartite agreement with the government of Uganda through the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development and the Uganda National Oil Company Limited in relation to importation and transit of petroleum product through Kenya to Uganda.
As we have witnessed, the tripartite agreement on the importation and transit of refined petroleum products through Kenya to Uganda, whose signing we've just witnessed, enables Uganda National Oil Company Limited to import refined product commodities directly from producers in different jurisdictions, thus bringing to an end the challenges faced by the sector in Uganda. We will continuously provide support to make sure that this new agreement is implemented, is functioning, and is mutually beneficial. We have also agreed that we will now explore jointly the extension of the pipeline from Eldoret to Kampala that will form the conversation in the next Joint Ministerial Committee.
While addressing the press earlier today, President Ruto underscored the significance of bilateral relations and extended his commitment to enhance these relations.
We have also agreed on the border issues that have been of concern to border communities, and shortly we will be visiting those regions with a view to bringing the communities together.
While referring to the second session of the joint ministerial meeting held from May 12 to 14, 2024 in Kampala, President William Ruto highlighted the importance of the signed 7 instruments of cooperation.
I take this opportunity to assure Your Excellency of my personal support and commitment of the Republic of Kenya to work with you and the government of Uganda in furthering our bilateral agenda and mutual interest of our people.
On his side, President Yoweri Museveni explained the importance of political integration as this would enhance the prosperity of the two countries.
And as you can see in Africa, we have got so many problems. The collapse of state authority in so many countries. This is not accidental.
President Museveni's 3-day state visit to Kenya is set to end tomorrow. James Baraka, KUTV News.
Alright, now let's switch gears to matters finance. Now, with the finance bill in its public participation stages, Kenyans are expressing their concerns with the upward trajectory of taxation by the Kenya Kwanza government. The consortium, Reform Education Consortium, that is GRICO, while addressing pressing briefing in Nairobi today, decried the state abuse of power in passing on tax-laden legislations, despite heavy rejection from the people during the public participation process. Our very own Munene Weru now reports.
While the window for public participation in the finance bill legislation process is now open, a shadow of doubt has been cast over the public participation stage. Kenyans and civil societies skeptical that their voices will be heard. Finance Bill 2024 proposes a litany of taxes, but what has spurred a frenzy are the VAT tax increment on basic commodities, 16% duty on cash transactions, and the contested motor vehicle tax.
Ni kilio chetu kama wananchi, kama serikali wangeweza kutisikiza, angalau wasikilize kilio chetu, mahali ambapo kodi imefika wasizidi kuongeza, maana ukiongeza tutazidi kuumia.
I'm not going to afford the bread. Yeah, so it means that I'll go for cheaper options like kangumus, such things.
Kwa upande wa bodaboda aswa sisi tumeadhiriwa sana because maisha imeenda juu. Wakenya hawana pesa. Sasa unapata pahali unabeba mtu ukimcharge 100 anakuambia hapana, ako na 50.
While addressing members of the press at a hotel in Nairobi, the Constitution Reform Education Consortium (CRECO) lamented the ripple effect on punitive taxes on the cost of living, calling on Kenyans to get ready for mass action to oppose the planned tax regime by Ruto's government.
The finance bill, which contained punitive taxes levied on Kenyans, such as the 16% VAT on bread and motor vehicle taxation, to a maximum of Kenya shillings 100,000. This is against the wishes of the Kenyans who are already overburdened by heavy taxation and also, of course, very punitive high cost of living.
And this is what we are calling upon Kenyans to do. Watch out. You must stand firm. Maandamano might not be the way to go necessarily, but there are very many options we have, including judicial petitions to ensure that the will of the people is respected.
CRECO is wary that even while the window for public participation is open, Kenyans' voices run the risk of suppression, as last year the Finance Bill 2023 passed without alterations, even after facing a rigorous public uproar.
And perhaps the most important part is that in what ways does government take into account the views of the people? We saw this last year. Many Kenyans from across the divide were categorical that they did not like the finance bill. But what happened? It was passed almost to the last letter, as it were.
And sometimes bills are passed in parliament and, no input from the public was seen there whatsoever. So what comes and happens afterwards is, people start to complain about these measures. Look at the housing levy, for instance. That was going to be passed, right?
President William Ruto said he is hell-bent to raise the tax levels from 14% to 22%, with the opposition of the raft of measures in the finance bill notwithstanding. Kenyans are expressing their concerns with the rising cost of living affected by the tax proposals in the Finance Bill of 2024. And as the bill is in its public participation stage, they are asking their voices to be heard one more time. Munene Weru, KUTV, Nairobi.
All right, thank you Munene Weru for that. Now switching gears, stakeholders have expressed their disdain over the rise of fake news across various platforms, a situation that they say hampers the spread of factual news, causing panic and chaos. This was during a conference held earlier today in Nairobi by the Constitution and Reform Education Consortium, or if you prefer the acronym CRECO, where matters concerning misinformation and fake news were discussed during the conference. The need to educate the public about the fake news and its dangers was emphasized as one way to stop the normalization of fake news.
Doing more good work in committing and combating misinformation, extending to our programming. This is by shows such as Law Matters.
Even as state actors, we are also partly guilty. And therefore, we also need to look internally and see how we can be able to also help out in terms of, making sure that information is reliable, it's verifiable, and of course, the most important thing, the believability aspect.
For them, if it's a media influence, anything in the social media, they assume is news that I need to pass over.
Now let's dive into matters climate for a bit. In an effort to combat rural poverty and food insecurity, the IFAD Climate Resilience Program is working to uplift over 14,000 households by promoting climate-resilient agricultural practices and enhancing natural resources management. This is being achieved through initiatives like the Kenya Cereal Enhancement Program. Take a look.
Over 14,000 households across 13 counties in Kenya are set to benefit from IFAD Climate Resilience Program that aims to combat rural poverty and food insecurity. Speaking during the Kenya Cereal Enhancement Program, IFAD coordinator Dr. Cosmas Munyeke notes that the program is currently focused on enhancing agricultural practices among the farmers. Ronald Ajengo, Country Program Coordinator for IFAD Kenya, says the project being implemented in 13 counties aims at reducing rural poverty and food insecurity among smallholders in Kenya, arid and semi-arid lands by developing the economic potential.
Me here is a team from both IFAD and the Government of Kenya. IFAD Government of Kenya mission to supervise one of our programs called Kenya Cereal Enhancement Program, KSEP-KRAL, which is implemented in a number of counties, 13 counties to be specific, and Kilifi County happens to be one of them. So let me just say that as IFAD, we do support the government in terms of agricultural development, but we also do understand that
Dr. Cosmas Munyeke, KCEP Senior Program Coordinator, says the program enhances food and nutrition security through provision of clean water for household use and kitchen gardening to increase their income generation.
It's a program, it's a national government program that partners with the 13 counties Rhoda has talked about. Kilifi is one of the counties, and the main objective of this program is to enhance food and nutrition security among the communities, among the households that we target. Besides food security, enhancement of food security, we are also looking at enhancing resilience of the targeted communities. And one of the major interventions in terms of resilience enhancing is an intervention like the one we've just seen.
Clemens Monia, IFAD Environment and Climate Analyst, says the climate resilience benefits are both short-term and long-term, which involves conservation of the ecosystem.
Seeing a lot of benefits both in the short term and in the long term. So of course, as mentioned, from a resilience perspective, trees are helping to provide nutrition to the communities, but from an environment and climate perspective, especially in these contexts of a lot of disasters, we're also seeing benefits in the short term in terms of soil stabilization and soil health. Trees are really important to be able to bring the right nutrients to the soil, that are necessary for it to be stable, for it to absorb water better, and for it to conduct the right nutrition.
Key achievements of the program have been increased productivity among the value chains to 50% and reduction of post-harvest losses among the households. Rahab Wanja, KUTV.
Now that story by Rahab Wanja rather takes us to our first break here on KUTV Primetime News. Remember, we still have plenty in store for you, so don't go too far.
Kaunti maarufu kwa kuzalisha maziwa na ukuzaji wa majani chai. Pia, serikali ya kaunti inawahimiza wakulima kukumbatia mitindo mingine ya kilimo kuzidisha mapato.
Kama kuna kikundi moja inafanya biashara ya kuuza kuku, hao pia tumewafadhili kuwafunza jinsi ya kuhandle zile kuku kwa sababu wanaleta kwa wingi.
Haya yote tunakuletea katika Boresha Kilimo, toleo la kaunti ya Bomet.
Kilimo ni nguzo kubwa kwa ujenzi wa taifa.
Are you an aspiring media practitioner, a graduate, or you just want to advance your skills in television production? Then welcome to Kenyatta University, where education meets innovation. KUTV, the premier university television station in Kenya, is now offering short courses in TV studio, field technical operations, and video editing. Through these courses, you will acquire hands-on skills on camera operations, media production, lighting techniques, audio-visual editing, and sound and visual control, and how to operate key equipment in modern TV control room. Enroll today at KUTV and discover your full potential in cutting-edge TV broadcasting. Graduates of these courses will receive professional certificates. For more information, visit our offices at KUTV Studios or call us on 020-870-4252 or 020-870-4255 or SMS us on 0739-110-544. KUTV, a new experience.
Access to knowledge. Solution to unanswered questions.
Guidelines to pursuing your rights and repossessing your property, intellectual or material.
This and more only on Law Matters.
You are watching KUTV Primetime News with Auma Evans.
Welcome back, and we are glad you chose to stay with us. Now, education matters. School management in Embu County have been urged to be more attentive to constructional works within their institutions. This follows the collapse of several toilets in schools across Embu County. Assessments have been have established that the majority of collapsed toilets points towards weak structural integrity. This is according to the County Director of Education, Kosgei Kipruto. Kipruto notes that the collapse of the toilets was contributed by poor workmanship, citing weak structural foundations as key cause of the witnessed misfortune.
Going forward, we are also advising that they become more keen in construction, because we established that the collapse was not actually because of majorly on the rains alone, but because of poor workmanship, especially on very old toilets, which had very poor foundations, poor construction. In one of the toilets that we saw that collapsed in Kakwegori Primary School, that is a newly constructed toilet. I think it was hardly 2 years old.
Now it's time to get the latest in the world of sports. Kimei Kiprono is the latest Kenyan athlete to be suspended by the Athletics Integrity Unit after he was found guilty of doping. Kiprono was served with a notice of charge for violating Article 2.1 and Article 2.2 of the AIU anti-doping regulations. His suspension comes at the backdrop of AU's crackdown on the prohibited substance. Now let's switch gears to matters football. Manchester United beat Newcastle United 3-2 at Old Trafford in a 5-goal thriller in the English Premier League clash. Amad Diallo opened the scoreboard before Kobe Maino and Rasmus Hojlund each scored to give the Manchester United 3 crucial points. In another match played in the English Premier League, Chelsea beat Brighton 2-1 to move 6th place in the table standings, closing in on an Europa League qualifications. Alright, we are taking yet another short break here on KUTV Primetime News. Remember, up next is our discussion where we take a look at matters finance bill. We'll be taking rather dissect on key aspects regarding this proposed finance bill of 2024. All you need to know about this proposed finance bill, how it affects you and why it's very important. Remember, there has been some outrage from Kenyans regarding this particular finance bill. Others just terming it as impunitive, and of course the one that actually punished them as the ordinary Kenyans. This is the discussion that is coming up next, and we invite your comment and feedback. You can join this discussion. Remember, our SMS line, or rather our social media handles, are just open for you to engage with us, and that discussion will be coming to you in just a while after this very short break. See you on the other side.
Are you an aspiring media practitioner, a graduate, or you just want to advance your skills in television production? Then welcome to Kenyatta University, where education meets innovation. KUTV, the premier university television station in Kenya, is now offering short courses in TV studio, field technical operations, and video editing. Through these courses, you will acquire hands-on skills on camera operations, media production, lighting techniques, audio-visual editing, and sound and visual control, and how to operate key equipment in modern TV control room. Enroll today at KUTV and discover your full potential in cutting-edge TV broadcasting. Graduates of these courses will receive professional certificates. For more information, visit our offices at KUTV Studios or call us on 020-870-4252 or 020-870-4255 or SMS us on 0739-110-544. KUTV, a new experience.
from the hospital corridors. We bring you experts to discuss issues affecting your health, from diet to mental health. The familiar and the ignored are both put into perspective. We then dive into the environment and look at the effects of climate change and its solutions. Join me, Mutegi K. Martin, every Friday at 9 p.m. as we learn on how to better our health while taking care of our environment. Only on KUTV.
Get ready to kickstart your day with the most exciting morning show around. Tune in to our dynamic and entertaining program where we keep you informed, engaged, and entertained from the moment you wake up.
From breaking news and current events to music, fun, and out of the ordinary stories, we've got you covered with a mix of interviews, games, and special segments. You never know what's in store.
Join us every Monday morning
and Tuesday morning
for a fun and fascinating way to start your day.
Don't miss out on the action.
Tune in now and experience the excitement for yourself.
Only on KUTV Rise Today from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m.
Start your day
with us.
Access to knowledge. Solution to unanswered questions.
Guidelines to pursuing your rights and repossessing your property, intellectual or material.
This and more only on Law Matters.
Maelfu na maelfu ya wahamiaji wakiwa na watoto kutoka nchi za Amerika ya Kati wanaendelea kuwasili kwenye mpaka kati ya Marekani na Mexico.
But folks, I'm going. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Ni habari kutoka pembe zote duniani.
Pepo pasi vuguvugu. Pepo pani idea.
Tazidi ananyonya, hanyonyi vizuri, anakuwa hayuko comfortable.
Jeshi la Jamhuri ya Kidemokrasia ya Kongo linapambana na waasi wa ADF.
Kwa sasa wanatoa wito kwa mashirika, makampuni na vile vituo vya uchukuzi.
Mambo mengi yatakwenda kama yalivyopangwa.
Hapa ni kuna mmoja wa viongozi wa chama cha wavuvi katika eneo hili.
Zaidi tunajaribu kuwapa chanjo ili ina boost ama inanyanyua kinga ya mwili, hiyo inaenda kupelekea kupambana na virusi.
Ni duniani leo, Jumatatu mpaka Ijumaa, moja kwa moja kutoka VOA Swahili, Washington DC.
Tunachimba hadi mizizi kukuletea yanayojiri.
So mimi naomba tu serikali yetu ya Mungu, jibarikiwe na Mungu, iweze kuteremsha bei ya mafuta.
Yanayokukumba tuna maizi, tunakutetea sisiri. Kwa kweli ni speciali tukikupambia makala ya mwanamke mwake. Utasema hupendi mizizi ya habari. Nami Caroline Kimweli.
You are watching KUTV Primetime News with Auma Evans.
Alright, welcome back. Now, good people, discussion about matters, taxes and finance is very close and dear to the hearts of many Kenyans. Now, the government wants to raise additional 323 billion in the proposed finance bill of 2024 to finance the key Kenya Kwanza government operations in the financial year 2024-2025. Should the proposed bill see the light of the day, your breakfast might get a little bit expensive. So this is why government proposes 16 VAT% on bread. Motor vehicle owners will have to pay at least 2.5% at the time of the issuance of an insurance cover. Telephone and internet and data money transfer services will shoot from 15 to 20%. Kenyans are now raging over the proposed taxes. What should the question now that we are asking, what should the government consider while making the budget? And that is the discussion that we are having tonight. And to help us dissect this topic, the proposed finance bill of 2024 is one and only Cuba Houghton. This is the program Support Research International Budget Partnership Kenya. Asante sana for making time.
Asante sana for having me.
You have a very interesting name.
Yes, I've been told.
All right. Well, this is the discussion about finance bill, and this is the proposed finance bill of 2024. It's something that have, raised some sort of reaction from Kenyans, just complaining about the manner at which the government is, to them, they believe that the government is overtasking them. Well, first, before even we dive into this particular discussion, and went from where you sit and as a budget and policy making expert, well, take us through the process of making, the budget making process, and what should government consider before even proposing such, finance bill?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for having us. I think at the International Budget Partnership Kenya, we really like taking these conversations about public finance, to citizens in both and government as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a great place to start, because the finance bill is a culmination of many decisions that have happened in the budget making process that we have here in Kenya.
Okay.
And it's according to law. So we need the Public Finance Management Act of 2012.
Mm-hmm.
That's essentially where Kenya gets its budget cycle and the key dates.
Mm-hmm.
And this process essentially begins every year, in August of every year, when the CS Treasury or the Treasury releases a circular to all ministries, departments and agencies to start making their budgets.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the beginning of what we call the formulation stage of the budget cycle. And there's four main stages.
Okay.
And then that kind of turns into, we first see the budget, or glimpses of the budget in the sector hearings, where the different sectors come and present their budgets for the next year, what they propose, which is also an opportunity, the first opportunity for citizens to get involved in the budget making process. That then feeds into the budget policy statement, which now is a very important document because it has a lot of information on what the budget for the coming year and over the medium term, so the next 2 to 3 years, will look like. And that's also another opportunity for the public to get involved. Now, in reference to the finance bill, the budget policy statement also outlines the amount of revenue we expect to collect. Right? This is tax revenue. And so it starts to give an indication of perhaps how much the government is projecting that it's going to collect. And that has an implication on the measure that we find in the finance bill. Right?
All right.
So the budget policy statement essentially marks the end of the budget formulation stage to some extent, with the division of revenue bill as well. And then we move to the approval stage, and that's the stage we're at now, which is where we're talking about the actual size of the budget and the specific budget lines that are going to go to each ministry, department and agency, the different services, and then as well as the finance bill. So the budget estimates is what we talk about now, the expenditure side. So what do we hope to spend? But the finance bill essentially is a document that contains the revenue raising measures that government wants to employ in order to raise the additional tax for that year. So like you mentioned, the additional tax for this year is about 377 billion. And so the Finance Act is meant to kind of fulfill that gap. So, but it's important to reiterate that it's a process that has been ongoing since August of last year. And so, we often say that, there's never a right time to engage in the budget cycle. You just engage. So if you had perhaps been engaging from August, we would have seen some of these measures coming. And of course, I think it would be good to mention that the Finance Bill of 2024 is a bit different from our previous finance bills because it was introduced it's the first finance bill that has been introduced since we had a medium-term revenue strategy, which is supposed to introduce some sort of predictability. So if you read the medium-term revenue strategy, you actually be able to see the taxes that were to be introduced in this finance bill. So that's allowed citizens and civil society and other actors to actually prepare better for this finance bill of 2024.
All right. Yeah. Well, now that you have given us a background on how the whole process takes in, well, there is the question that is raising a lot of concern from Kenyans, and this is the issue to do with what to consider when you propose such finance bill, because there is additional revenue to be raised that the government hope will raise in the next financial year of 2024-2025. That is 323 billion additional on top of what we have, right? Yeah. Well, what should you consider when, of course, proposing this bill, given all the variant at place?
Yeah.
Okay, because the bone of contention is in this now, they raise the additional taxes that the government want to collect. Remember, you have the 16 VAT on bread, you have 2.5% on motor vehicles, we have still another one that is proposed on motorcycles, and all these things, even the beverages, still there is tax that the government hope to collect should this proposed finance bill of 2024 see the light of the day. Yeah. But what should we consider before making that the final document?
Yes, I think it's an interesting question, because I think that the things that the government has to consider are also the same things that citizens have to consider.
Right.
And it's also things for us to consider as we go forth during the public participation period, which was announced, which is between now and I think 28th of May. So one of the lenses that we've been looking at the finance bill through is a lens of feasibility. So there are a couple of lenses. So one is feasibility, one is the connection to services and service delivery, and the third one is the balance of the two. So when it comes to feasibility, what essentially we mean is, are the tax measures actually going to raise the tax revenue that we envision? And I'll give you two examples. So in a previous Finance Act, I believe it was Finance Act of 2021, there was a proposition that was introduced and actually approved to raise the excise duty on mobile data and internet. Right? I believe it was either between 12 and 15% or 15 and 20%. And what essentially happened is that the argument was that we're going to raise the tax rates, we're going to collect an additional, I think it was 9 billion shillings. But what happened in practice is that people stopped using data. People stopped using as much airtime. So actually the tax revenue from that source went down by 18%.
Okay, and we'll talk about the effect of overtaxing Kenyans.
Yes.
And there is another now aspect, because now taxing the essential commodities. For example, in the last finance bill, we're talking about 16% on fuel, and now we are talking about 16% on 16% VAT on bread, which is very essential commodity as far as the livelihood of ordinary Kenyans are concerned. Should this see the light of the day, a price of bread could increase up to 10 shillings, and that is a basic commodity. And many are saying touching bread might actually, have some repercussion on many families. So the method that government is using, why task or add taxation on, very essential commodities like bread, even fuel that many Kenyans consume?
Yeah.
Why focus on that?
So I think, yes, there's two aspects that. So it also has a bit of a feasibility aspect, which is that if you're going to tax a commodity that everyone uses, what are the alternatives available, right? Are they just going to use less, or they're going to use more of something else? But the second part, I think, of that is fairness, right? Because if you, look at the idea, the philosophy or the idea behind introducing or VAT exempting or zero rating bread in the first place, is because it's a good that was assumed to be consumed by the poor, right? Or by every, you could say every Kenyan. And so if you're going to apply a VAT of 16% on bread, then as it was perhaps at some point before they introduced the zero rating, you'd be affecting the poorer more than the rich person, right? Because 16% of 100 shillings is 16 shillings, but over 100,000 shillings, it's much smaller proportion. So it's, by applying a VAT on a common commodity like that, the question is it a progressive tax or is it a regressive tax? Does it affect the poor more, affect the poor less, right? Or does it tax the rich more or tax the rich or the poor more? And so that those are kind of the lenses that's important to consider on these commodities.
And let me just get a clarity on this. Now that you've proposed another very interesting aspect, well, now let's talk about the 16% on bread. What is the rationale? Who does it target? Does it target the poor or the rich?
Yeah. So I think it's something that we hope to see in public participation. Once we've given our views, we hope to get an explanation on the reason why. There is an interview, I believe, a meeting that the CS Treasury was having at some point, where he explained the rationale, and it's publicly available. The rationale was essentially that so because it's zero rated, it means that the person who produces that product can claim a VAT refund on the inputs, on the taxes they've paid on inputs to produce the bread, so taxes on flour or whatever it is, or oil. And also at the point of sale, they can claim that VAT back, which means that now they don't have to pass those costs on to the consumer, so it's cheap. So the argument that was given in that clip was that that was a significant portion of money, a significant amount of money, and that in reality the people who actually buying bread in shops where the VAT is presumably applied are actually middle class and not poor people. And so what we are doing is subsidizing the middle class. And I'm still yet to kind of fully understand the argument, but that's actually something that we hope to get clarification on. But VAT is an example of a consumption tax, right? Which means that it applies equally to everyone who consumes that product.
Right.
So like I mentioned, someone who has a smaller income will be more impacted than someone who has a larger income. And that's the same case for bread, if you introduce it on milk as well, among other products. So the question remains as to whether it's actually a fair proposal, and whether there's a way to make it more progressive so that the people who can pay more are actually able to pay more.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, now that you have bring the aspect of fairness, well, we have now the 2.5% on motor vehicles. And for those who own motor vehicles, for example, essentially, for many people, you might think that this actually trickled down now, or rather the intended target is the owners of the motor vehicle. But if you are in a public service and you own a couple of vehicles, remember, when you pay these 2.5% of the proposed now new tax, then that means you'll trickle down the effect to ordinary Kenyan. And I don't know, what do you read into this, but do you think maybe this to some sort is unwise move from maybe the government side?
So I think there's a couple of questions you can ask, which is similar to the one that you've made, which is what's the ultimate goal of the tax, right? Is it a wealth tax? So is it meant to tax those who have assets or the value of something, especially for those who have those things, those items? Is it a income tax? So you're taxing the income that someone can generate from perhaps owning a vehicle. And so that remains a big question. So it's what exactly is the goal of the tax? Because initially, actually, when we had read it, we thought it was a climate-related tax because, if you look at the way road use taxes or taxes related to motor vehicles have been used in other countries, particularly, developed countries, is that it's used as either as a tool to reduce congestion, so it's applied very specifically in certain areas, or it can be used as a tool to reduce just pollution generally, so to incentivize people towards using electric vehicles. But it doesn't seem like that's the rationale here, and so we're still questioning what the rationale is. But it's true that when you oppose, so taking the example of PSVs, is that when you impose a tax, an additional tax that a PSV has to pay, they're likely to reflect it in the price of the vehicle, in the price of their services. And another concern, of course, there is the amount of taxation that would add to vehicles, for example, PSVs, because you already have an import declaration fee when you import a vehicle. You already have a road maintenance levy, which is what we pay on fuel. PSVs also pay an advance tax, which is a tax that's applied in anticipation of the people that you will actually carry over the year. So I think it's according to the seating of the vehicle. And on top of that, even when we pay insurance, there's a premium on insurance. There's a tax we pay on insurance premiums, rather, of 4%. So now we'd be adding another 2.5% to all of that. So ultimately, the question that could be raised is that, is there a different way to frame this motor vehicle circulation tax so that perhaps it targets those who have more luxury vehicles, right? Because then it would be perhaps more of a wealth tax. But there's still a number of questions around whether it will actually, what the policy goal is and whether it will actually achieve that in practice.
Well, yesterday, President William Ruto, mentioned a few, things that probably might concern Kenyans, and this in regard to taxation policy. And he's hoping maybe it will go up to, let's say, was it 23%? And of course, now this, in regard to this now begs another question about our taxation policy as Kenya compared to other countries in Africa. So how is our taxation policy here in Kenya if you compare to our neighbors like Uganda? Do we overtask our people, or where are we really? Because the president's message should really, worry many Kenyans. Now that means that today you are talking about additional 323 billion shillings. Who knows about the next financial year?
Yeah, so I think before we start comparisons of other countries, it's good to understand how we got ourselves in this situation, and that the reason why, or perhaps the rationale behind all of this aggressive, you could say, revenue mobilization, is that Kenya's public debt crisis has become an issue that it can't avoid anymore, right? And the reason, the fact that in the coming financial year, alongside the finance bill, the other document is the budget estimates, and they actually show that, or they propose that we'll spend actually, out of every 100 shillings that we collect in tax revenue, we'll be spending 63 shillings on public debt, which means we have just 37 shillings to spend on services. So that also explains why we need to collect more revenue. So we have more money available for services and servicing public debt. And so our tax situation is, or rather why this debate has really come up quite heavily now about Kenya's tax system and whether we're collecting enough, is because over time the need for tax revenue has increased, right? But when you go to comparisons to other countries, sometimes it can be difficult because it can be comparing apples to oranges, where a country has a significantly higher GDP, right? Which means their capacity to collect taxes is a lot more, or they have a higher GDP growth, which means the increase in taxes.
And that is the case of Kenya right now.
Well, it depends on who
because the president says we are not up to standard according to our GDP.
Yeah.
And of course, he thinks maybe going forward, Kenyans should actually, pay more. And do you think maybe that's a prudent move?
So so the amount of tax you collect as a percentage of whatever, whether it's GDP or a percentage of whatever it could be, is a factor of many things. One, it's a factor of how much of your tax rates, right? So your income tax rate, is it high or is it low, right? Another one is the efficiency of your tax system. Right. Is it easy for people to pay tax? Is it easy for KRA, for example, to collect tax, right? And then perhaps a very significant part of that is the income and the income growth of the people in the economy and the businesses and the economy generally, so the growth of the economy. So, perhaps one of the problems that Kenya has been facing is that our economy has not been growing as fast, right, in a way that actually allows us to collect more taxes. And alongside that, there's also the idea that perhaps our tax procedures could be more effective, right? And I think that's what the government has been trying to do with e-teams and a lot of different other reforms on how to make tax collection easier and how to particularly expand the tax base, right?
Okay.
But what we do see is that there's quite a bit of emphasis maybe on the tax rates as opposed to the economic growth aspect, because if you were to have a tax rate of 10% now, and in 2030 there's still 10%, but your income has actually grown significantly, you collect a lot more revenue, perhaps, than by increasing the tax rate itself. So it's a balance of those three. And so when we're considering how we're doing in comparison to our partners, we need to look at all those three as opposed to just tax to GDP ratio,
right.
which is what the president was referring to, I believe.
All right. And there is another, a very tricky or rather tricky situation between now the government and of course Kenyans. They need to balance. Where do you strike, the balance between now not over taxation and at the same time not, under taxation? So the government is in a state whereby it has to balance between now the needs of Kenyans, given all these variant into play. Remember, this is a country that it's fair to say majority of Kenyans are unemployed, and of course when you impose heavy taxation on unemployed Kenyans, the repercussions that will come with it. So where do you draw the line?
Excellent question. And in fact, I would say that whether you're being overtaxed or not is subjective, which means that depending, you could have the same tax rate in different countries, but they may not feel overtaxed, right? So I think perhaps the disconnect is that, perhaps Kenyans are not able to connect the tax that they're collecting to the services they're receiving, right? Which I think is why it's so important to connect this conversation around the finance bill to the budget estimates, because that's an indication of the tax of the services you'll receive over the coming financial year. So for example, if you look at the budget for the next year, is it reflective of the services that you want to consume or the services that you want to pay for with your taxes, right? Because you could argue that if, if we paid even up to 70% of our incomes in tax, right? Extreme scenario, but our children went to school for free, right? When we go to the hospital, we are treated. When we need an ambulance, we are treated free of charge, right? Or at least we're treated first, and then we have conversations about being charged. That when there's heavy rains, it doesn't flood all the time, right? That our roads are actually resilient, right? So the issue of overtaxing, I think, it's not necessarily a factor of how much people are making, but how much the government is perhaps also delivering in terms of services. Because I think the disconnect for many Kenyans is whether there's actually a comparison between the tax I'm paying and the services I'm receiving, because that's what the taxes are supposed to go towards. And so the question of taxation, I think it boils down to whether people are actually getting the services that they actually want to pay for. Yes.
All right. For a nation, but this one first of all, I'll have to get your opinion on this. Do you think Kenyans are being overtaxed?
I cannot speak on behalf of Kenyans.
As a Kenyan, of course.
As a Kenyan myself.
Talk to me based on your perspective.
I think there are things that the government could do to improve the way they deliver public services, right? In a way that would perhaps equate more the tax that is collected and the tax that is, and then the services that are removed.
All right.
And that's a factor of many things, of course, but I do believe that there is an opportunity for that. Yes.
All right. Now this beg the question, the effect of overtaxation. What is the effect? If you overtax a nation, what is the final result? What could it have? The effect that it will have on a country. Now that is where this discussion is now narrowing down to. So what is the effect of overtaxation?
Well, again, I'd say overtaxation is subjective, but the benefit I think that we've seen, let me say the benefit, or one of the outcomes, especially from the finance bill of last year and the finance bill of this year, is that citizens are becoming more passionate and aware about their public finances, right? I think for a lot of Kenyans, it was the first time they heard of a finance bill last year, right? Yeah. And so I think one of the positive outcomes of this is that people have realized that there should be a relationship between the taxes that are collected from me, whether they are whether they are too much or too little, between those taxes and the services that I receive, right? And I think that's where it's narrowing down to, where people are realizing that if I'm going to pay all these taxes, fine, right? Let's work on making these taxes efficient and feasible, right? But we'll pay them. But is there services that we're going to see in return for that, right? When I go to a hospital, will my NHIF card work? Or will I face certain challenges that perhaps I shouldn't be facing if I wasn't paying tax?
All right.
And so I think that's one of the outcomes of this kind of overtaxing conversation, which is that people become like and I'll give you an example. So with the finance bill of 2023, I think we saw one of the most robust public participation exercises that perhaps Kenya has seen in a long time. We saw over 1,000 memorandums submitted to the Finance and National Planning Committee of the National Assembly. We saw a very good public participation report, surprisingly good public participation report, on showing exactly what people proposed. And sometimes it was just someone asking a question. Sometimes it's just someone saying we disagree with this proposal. They won't even give me a justification. They just said that this one will affect us badly, right? And the committee actually responded to that line by line. And so I think that's been one of the positive outcomes of this, which is that people are starting to, Kenyans are starting to become alive to this conversation and to realize it's not just something that happens in Parliament or something that happens in Treasury, that this is something that actually affects all of us and that we can actually get involved in.
All right. Well, one of the most interesting things that should worry you as a Kenyan, of course, is the disconnect between this finance bill and, of course, the expectations of majority of Kenyans. And when this government rode into, power, one of the key promises was to lower the cost of living. And what majority of Kenyans are feeling when you increase the value on, let's say, bread, and of course, just like you mentioned, the last finance bill was a very robust one. Majority of Kenyans put in their input, and of course, they had at least some sort of discussion on what they think should be the final product. And of course, when you have a disconnect like this, and at one point the government has to balance, at the same time there is Kenyans who need at least the cost of living to be lowered. Even as we wind up this discussion, this disconnect, does it worry you as a Kenya?
Well, I'd say that yes and no. Because of course, when it's unhealthy for any democracy when there's a disconnect, or when perhaps people don't feel heard, right? But again, I do believe that what the last year of the Finance Bill 2023 and engagement has shown us, and even this year, is that Kenyans are quite keen on being heard. Right? Even if it's just Kenyans on Twitter or Kenyans on Facebook, they're keen on being heard. And so if you look on Facebook or let's say Twitter, a lot of the conversation now is how do we submit our views? A lot of the conversation is, guys, let's organize ourselves. Here's a template for a memorandum, send it out, right? And so I do believe that, although that disconnect is clear, I think Kenyans are more passionate about getting involved in these conversations, and not just in Nairobi. I believe it's around, it's across Kenya. All right. Yes, so I do believe that there is hope.
Okay. And talking of hope, and of course this particular discussion about the Finance Bill 2024, the proposed Finance Bill 2024, that the government is hoping to at least collect additional 323 billion shillings should it see the light of the day. And of course it has sparked some sort of outrage among Kenyans who feel that these are punitive form of taxations that the government is about to subject them. And today we are getting the insight about the proposed finance bill, what you need to know as ordinary citizen and how it concerns you. And of course that is where we leave it at this particular point. Thank you so much, Cuba Hutton, that is Program Support Research International Budget Partnership Kenya, for making time. Asante sana.
Thank you for having me.
All right. And of course we are running out of time, and my director is saying that time is not our friend, so we have to leave it at that point. Many thanks for men and women behind the scene who made this production a success, and of course for you, our esteemed viewers, for always keeping us a company in the last 60 minutes or so. My name is Auma Evans. Samuel Kelo has been our sign language interpreter tonight. Until next time, do have a lovely night, and God bless Kenya.